The last federal election of 2018 remains up for grabs, even though Republicans once thought it was in the bag. Mississippi is holding its special election for U.S. Senate today. GOP Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith is facing Democratic challenger Mike Espy. The seat has been reliably red for more than 35 years. However, Democrats now see an opportunity to flip it blue. CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe reports from Jackson, Mississippi.
The ballots will be to your left.
There was a steady stream of voters in some parts of the state today as Democrat Mike Espy
thank you for voting
and Republican Cindy Hyde-Smith sought out voters and cast their own ballots.
It's going to be a historic day.
If I'm lucky and privileged and blessed enough to be elected tonight, I think it's going to represent a sea change.
A win for Hyde-Smith increases the Republican majority in the Senate. That's why President Trump campaigned with her last night when he singled out Espy.
How does he fit in with Mississippi? But I could go over this, but how does he fit in?
Mike Espy.
That line caught Espy's attention.
Mike Espy was a member of Congress from Mississippi 4 times. I was elected in 1986. I was the first black congressman since the Civil War.
The closing weeks of this race focused on controversial comments by Hyde-Smith that showed her joking about a public hanging and voter suppression. Those are sensitive issues in a state with a troubled racial history. Mississippi had the highest number of lynchings of any state in the post-Civil War era, and the Confederate battle flag is still part of the state flag. Some voters view today's election as a turning point.
Mississippi is in a transition between the old and the new, and I think that's what this really represents.
And while many voters said they were disappointed with Hyde-Smith's choice of words, some said it wouldn't impact their vote.
Because her values are what my values are, and she may have slipped there, but it doesn't describe her at all.
Now, turnout at this polling location has been remarkably steady throughout the day with more than 2,400 votes cast. The good folks manning the tables here tell us that's actually pretty good for a runoff election. But statewide, officials and campaign aides tell us the turnout's been relatively low. And given historical trends, that likely benefits the Republican, Cindy Hyde-Smith. Tanya?
All right, Ed O'Keefe, thank you. Leslie Sanchez joins me now from Washington. She's a Republican strategist and CBSN political contributor. Leslie, great to see you. So as we heard, Senator Hyde-Smith has faced criticism for her comments regarding a, quote, public hanging. Could those remarks depress turnout today?
It definitely doesn't activate turnout. This is an issue where a lot of these kind of identity politics, race-based issues can have a counter effect. We've seen it in other southern states. So while it may depress perhaps African-American vote, it may actually engage and encourage traditional Republican voters to come out if they feel it was something that was, as we heard with one of those voters, a misspeaking, mischaracterization, but doesn't represent where Tanya, it's going to get interesting. Is this going to be a generational divide? And by that I mean like older traditional Republican voters, who tend to turn out in midterm elections, special elections. They're going to swing red, no doubt about that. But the state of transition that Mississippi and a lot of the New South is in, those voters want more compromise. They don't want the caustic tone. And if they turn out in a bigger way, and they may cross over to a Democratic candidate. It's still very unlikely, but that's where that sliver of hope is for the Democrats.
All right, let's listen to some of Hyde-Smith's apology.
For anyone that was offended by my comments, I certainly apologize. There was no ill will, no intent whatsoever. I also recognize that this comment was twisted and it was turned into a weapon to be used against me, a political weapon used for nothing but personal and political gain.
So as a strategist, do you feel this was enough of an explanation? There was a little bit of sorry, not sorry there.
This is the tone of the 2016 election. It's actually been the tone since Donald Trump's been in office. It's basically a non-denial denial. And the hard part about that is what she's trying to characterize is that it was an innocent comment that is being politicized and weaponized against her, who is genuinely a good candidate for the state of Mississippi. That's for Mississippi voters to decide. But ultimately, that's where the rub is, and that's what's very difficult. And in terms of tone, because if you're seeing success, if you go over to a state like Alabama, which elected its first Democratic senator, Doug Jones, who beat Roy Moore, who was a flawed Republican candidate in the special election a year ago, he had numerous allegations against him, but it was this issue of sexual assault that really was the crossover, and they still tried to politicize that. But that issue is what made the race go very close, despite the fact it was a traditional tactic used by this administration, and we're hearing it again with Hyde-Smith.
Right. So let's talk about her competitor. Mike Espy was asked on Monday what he thinks it would take to flip the seat. Let's listen to what he said about that.
My path to victory is to get the most votes. And you speak as if I'm only getting black votes. I know I can't win only with black votes. That's never been where we are. We've got to get votes from everybody. So I tell everyone I need Republicans, I need independents, I need those who never voted before, all to come out tomorrow to vote for me.
So, Leslie, what exactly needs to go Espy's way for him to clinch victory? You spoke a little bit about the traditional voter. What about that newer, more moderate voter? Do they turn out in any, noticeable numbers in Mississippi?
Not necessarily in Mississippi, not necessarily in special elections. These are really tough, and you're coming off a holiday weekend. You can't discount that. I've seen really strong members, very good poll numbers, and then they get into these runoffs and these very strange special elections, and it's just really who mobilizes better. This is a ground game at this time, and Republicans tend to be very efficient at this. They mobilize and activate traditional voters that vote every election cycle regardless of what's going on. They tend to be older voters. They're not ones who are going to want to upset the apple cart. But this is what's different about 2018. It is the ability for these types of Democratic candidates in traditionally red states to appeal to voters who want to see compromise, who want to see a tone down of a lot of the hot rhetoric that's coming out of Washington. That is where you saw this blue wave really take effect and be effective in moving in a lot of winning candidates. But again, you have to add the caveat of it being a special election.
Well, this is, of course, a solidly red state, as we were saying, but the president and the Republican Party is taking no chances. President Trump held 2 rallies, not 1, but 2, for Hyde-Smith on Monday. How much does he see this race as about him, and how much is it about him?
Let's look at how many times the president has to go to traditionally red states. And I'm from Texas, and we love, red states getting a lot of attention for Republican presidents. But the truth is, this is time, effort, money. Can they mobilize? And it's sweat equity in this sense. The president has had to really ramp up the stakes, say that any attacks against her were misconstrued and they're being weaponized against a very solid, prepared, capable candidate. And that's what he's done. And it has proven on the Senate level, on the statewide level, to be effective, especially in red states. And states he won by almost 20 points.
And they're counting on it being effective here. Now, let's talk about that third candidate that was in the November 6th election, conservative Chris McDaniel. He picked up nearly 17% of the vote. That's a pretty sizable chunk. Is Hyde-Smith worried at all about his voters sitting this one out, or perhaps even voting against her?
She should be. I mean, any candidate shouldn't. It's interesting, if you listen to the Republican National Committee and the leadership on their calls, they're not taking anything for granted. They're putting, all the touch engagements. They're talking about the number of robocalls out there, the number of volunteers they have on the ground. This is really serious business when it comes to very slim margins. But you are really talking about the critical point. The reason these candidates, these third-way candidates, are getting this much support is because the base of what traditional establishment Republican candidates look like are not what we're seeing modeled today. You're seeing many more Trump kind of more caustic in tone, more identity politics, more race-oriented in terms of their messaging, and that is causing a problem for a lot of these moderate and even suburban voters who want to see compromise moving ahead on good fiscal policy.
It'll be interesting to see if there is any significant increase in the independent party in terms of registered voters coming up.